On the night of October 28, 1972, 5 men were in the house that serves as the main office for the naval personnel. The witness, Corporal Juan Fuentes Figueroa, 2 servicemen, Jose Gomez and Hector Jimenez, the telegraph operator, Jose Lima, and the acting petty officer, Francisco Cascudo. After dinner, the men sat around the table for some time, talking and playing cards. At 10:10 p.m., Corporal Fuentes had to check the generators, which are located at the base of the lighthouse. The lighthouse is a 66-meter high tower situated in the center of a large building housing the electric generators, the telegraph office, and other facilities. The roof of this building is a flat terrace, approximately 6 meters above the surrounding ground level. The house where the garrison lives is located 45 meters away from the lighthouse. As Corporal Fuentes approached the lighthouse, he noticed some lights on top of the terrace that shouldn't have been there. In fact, he initially thought it might be a vehicle, but realized that was impossible. He decided to return to the house and retrieve his pistol, which was in his room. To do this, he didn't need to pass through the kitchen where the other men were, so he didn't speak to them. It would later be discussed that this behavior is typical of the witness's personality. Having retrieved the pistol, he went outside again and began walking resolutely, but not quickly, towards the lighthouse, meanwhile disengaging the safety on the weapon and raising it. As he did so, he noticed the object had several lights, some white, some yellowish, and a third color he described as violet, like in a rainbow. The lights were quite distinct, and he noticed a figure next to the object, while a second figure was about to emerge. A third, taller silhouette began to descend almost immediately, but at that very moment, the first 2 figures noticed Fuentes approaching them, and all 3 stared at him. By then, Fuentes was approximately 27 meters away from the object, which, as we recall, was on top of the 6-meter high terrace. Consequently, the object was above him, and he started to extend his arm to fire. However, he did not shoot, as the beings prevented him from doing so. Fuentes, a man of limited education, struggled to explain to investigators how this happened. It wasn't telepathy, but he felt some physical influence, something like a vibration. His hair stood on end, but most surprising was what felt like a warning in his mind. Don't shoot. It's useless. In any case, he felt paralyzed and confused, and was simply unable to fire. This happened quite quickly. The beings re-entered their craft. Although Fuentes didn't notice a ladder or railing, he clearly saw the movement of the silhouettes against the lights of the object. The figures were illuminated by beams coming through the open door. He is sure there were stairs, as the beings had their backs to the witness, and their movements resembled those of a person climbing while holding onto a railing. The door closed sideways, and the craft began to move straight up, emitting a buzzing sound, until it had ascended approximately 45 meters, which could be judged by comparing it to the height of the adjacent lighthouse tower. Then the craft tilted, released a blinding ball of lightning from its base, and disappeared in silence at enormous speed towards the southeast. The witness returned to the house where the other men were. They noticed he was white as a sheet and still tightly gripping the weapon in his hand. When he said he had seen a flying saucer, they didn't believe him, except for Petty Officer Cascudo. Corporal Fuentes was very upset that his colleagues and immediate superiors doubted his story. Upon returning to Montevideo, he decided to go to one of the leading newspapers and publish what he had seen. However, before he could do this, he was ordered to report to a higher-ranking official who listened carefully to what Fuentes had to say. Then he was sent to an office where 2 members of the American embassy were waiting for him. According to Fuentes, they were officials from the Committee for the Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, and their presence at the command office was apparently quite common. Fuentes waited in the corridor, and after some time, someone came out and asked him to look through some pictures and select the one closest to what he had seen. He did so and was dismissed. He never spoke directly with the Americans, but from a conversation Fuentes overheard through the door, he concluded that they were surprised by the close proximity at which the corporal had observed the event. And I am struck by the persistent interest shown by American embassies in an allegedly non-existent phenomenon, about which they continued to talk and gather information. While the incident lasted approximately 1 minute, Corporal Fuentes observed the object for more than 15 seconds. It was well illuminated by its own lights. It was coincidental that the external lights, which normally illuminate the exterior of the installations, were not on that night. If the floodlights had been on, they would have hindered the witness from clearly seeing what was happening by blinding him during observation. As it turned out, he observed the beings against the background light emanating from their craft. Even if this prevented seeing details like faces, their outlines and movements were still quite distinct. When Corporal Fuentes started walking towards the lighthouse, the first being was already on the terrace, while the second was exiting the craft. These two beings were approximately 1.50 meters, 5 feet, tall, while the third, who descended last, was taller, 1.75 to 1.80 m, about 6 feet. Thus, their height was within the average human range. Their silhouettes were dark, as if they were wearing heavy black rubber suits. The witness noted their slow and deliberate movements due to the weight of their suits and thought that his presence had surprised the strangers at the beginning of an operation that would never be completed. Their descent from the craft was done backwards, as if they were using an attached ladder that the witness did not see. Similarly, when they climbed back aboard, their movements resembled those of a person holding onto a railing. The most interesting feature of the beings, most noticeable in the profile the witness saw, was the elongated shape of their backs, starting right from their heads. It is unclear whether this pertained to the head itself or if it was a type of hood or robe. The craft had the shape of an inverted saucer with a diameter of 4 to 5 meters. On top, there was a dome and a rectangular aperture or door used by the beings for descent. Figure 3. Note: figure references from the original text. It also had landing struts, which the witness clearly saw during the initial departure as the craft slowly gained altitude. These struts did not fold like aircraft landing gear, but retracted telescopically. The surface of the craft was undoubtedly metallic, of a reddish color that Fuentes compared to the color of mahogany. The most interesting feature of the object was an antenna located on top, shaped like a corkscrew, which rotated. We have already described the lights. However, it should be added that they appeared to Fuentes as small squares that moved and sparkled like a billboard. He is the only witness who saw the event. Since then, this case has become Uruguay's most interesting due to the detailed investigation carried out by members of CIOVI. This document is based on the information contained in their report on this case. The first stage of the investigation consisted of 2 long interviews with the witness in his own home. Both interviews were recorded, and subsequent transcript analysis revealed no inconsistencies in the narrative. The investigations were accompanied by an on-site reenactment of the situation with the participation of the witness. Petty Officer Cascudo, who was present on the island that night, concluded that Corporal Fuentes' initial version was similar to the subsequent descriptions provided later to the investigative team. Petty Officer Cascudo, as well as other superiors of Corporal Fuentes, characterized him as a simple and honest man, incapable of fantasizing or fabricating anything. But in fact, the most interesting part of the COV investigation was the fact that they resorted to the help of a professional and subjected the witness to numerous psychological tests, the completion of which took a total of 9 hours, and then compared the results with others: Ravens, Bender Gestalt, Rorschach, and PMK, Psychodiagnostic Myokinetic Test by Miro Y. Lopez. As a result of these various tests, both positive and negative characteristics of the witness's personality were obtained, but after analyzing Corporal Fuentes' account, they concluded that the stories complemented each other and were indeed truthful. Further on, the main elements of the psychological assessment will be indicated by quotation marks, interspersed with comments when they relate to specific aspects of the case. Initially, the witness was characterized as a sincere, simple man. He explained what truth meant to him in a very interesting way, without cultural barriers. The witness did not possess the ability for invention and fantasies because he understood he could lose credibility. Furthermore, he has a low intellectual level of development. The psychologist also adds that his imagination is completely undeveloped, and he has a very poor understanding of happenings in the social environment. All these are positive points confirming that the witness is telling the truth. In fact, the investigators were able to determine that the witness had almost no understanding of the phenomenon itself. From an emotional standpoint, the witness was characterized as insecure, emotional, and even aggressive in unexpected situations. They accurately described the witness's state when he encountered the vehicle on the terrace